Hi, this is Robert Clinkenbeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing content from accomplished leaders and business owners to provide you some value, to help you scale your business, to become a better father, and push yourself to higher goals personally. We hope you really enjoy these shows, and we really encourage you to share this with your friends and network to help share these messages. I'm super excited to announce a new partnership we have with Site Recon. If you're tired of measuring properties, the Site Recon platform fully automates the measurements so you can then focus on sales. Think measurements, think Site Recon. So this is Robert Clinkenbeard with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. I'm super excited to be joined today by Jack Becker. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Glad you could be here. So you said you're sitting in a hotel room in the middle of snowy Pennsylvania.
That's correct. Yes.
Well, I'm glad you could join us. Hopefully you get back out of there, back down to, you said Virginia Beach.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, cool. Well, good luck. So, Jack, tell me a little bit about your. You've got quite a colourful background. Your very impressive background. Tell me a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. After spending a career as a fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy, I saw a need to apply the lessons learned that I had from that career as an instructor pilot and operational fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy. And a lot of these skills that I learned were directly translatable to the American workplace. And a lot of people first raise an eyebrow when I say things like that. But 12 years ago, I founded a company called Flight Level Solutions. And it was a keynote providing company, and also with workshops and training sessions where we provide people insight into how my world as a fighter pilot is very dynamic, fast-paced, and rapidly changing. And the skills I use are really applicable to a lot of entrepreneurs when they finally realize that their world is very similarly dynamic, fast-paced, and rapidly changing.
So go into that a little bit further, because, I think our fast pace is totally different from what you would term. I mean, you're F-18 Hornets, Super Hornets. I mean, you're probably one of the most highly decorated landing signal officers. So, I mean, as I say, really impressive background here. But, just to put that in context with just the normal layman.
Sure. Well, so the skill set that I'm referring to is a process that aviators use, and it's Navy fighter pilots and NASA astronauts alike. It's a skill set called crew resource management. And it's a very simple process that pilots use to minimize or mitigate human error, basically to make fewer mistakes. It has nothing to do, this skill set has nothing to do with flying airplanes. It's just how we as fallible human beings can make fewer mistakes on the job. So I saw an opportunity to translate this skill set to people doing almost every career under the sun, excuse me, because everybody I know can benefit by making fewer mistakes on the job. So I took this process of crew resource management, and it very simple boils down to a 4-step process that we use. And that is simply brief, execute, debrief, and then perfect. So in the briefing phase, I've worked with a lot of companies that do a pretty good job of setting the tone for what they're going to do, whether it be an 8-hour workday, a week-long 5-day work week, or a 6-month project, but they do a fairly good job of setting the tone beforehand. But I give them a structured way to quickly and efficiently brief. And then it's on to the execution phase. And that is where we use these skills of crew resource management. And they're very simply communication, assertiveness, leadership, decision-making, task analysis, adaptability, flexibility, and then kind of the all-encompassing big one, and that's situational awareness. So I teach folks how to use those skills during their work week or work day on the job, whatever it is they do. After that comes the most crucial step, and that's the debrief, where we take a super critical look at how we did. And this is the point that I stress to people, where we have the opportunity to repeat our successes and not repeat our failures. And it's a very powerful thing coming from fighter pilots, that we are so hypercritical of each other in the both good and bad as we scrutinize what we've done. And that's really how we learn to make tomorrow's event even better and more productive than today's. So after that debrief, the final step is to perfect. And that's taking those invaluable lessons learned and applying them to tomorrow's brief. So that cycle keeps going, and we just keep raising the level of human performance day in and day out, over and over again.
That's great, because it's actually interesting you say that, because I definitely enjoy some of those books that the Navy SEALs have come out with, or the SAS, and
Sure.
a lot of them, they talk about how they keep going through, especially the debrief part, where they go through and they examine their mission, even if it went well, but they just go through it step by step and just see, well, how can we have done it better? And it's something that really stuck with me. But I'm going to go back and ask the question, give me an example of the initial brief part, because, I mean, a lot of the managers that came to me and, they explained that they'd given instructions to some of their team members and it didn't quite go the way it should have done. I always challenge them. I said, well, was it the people that executed the work, or was it the actual instructions given to them? Do you feel as though you were clear enough? And, more than often, it was just a poor ability to really explain, what the project was. So to talk to me a little bit about that, your process.
Sure, that's a great question. In the brief, our structure for that keeps things very quick and efficient, so we don't spend too much time talking about what we're going to do before we do it. But that too breaks down to a 4-step process, and that is very simply overview, objectives, tactics, and review. So the overview is pretty self-explanatory. What are we here to do today or this week? That's what our kind of our mission is. That's the overview. And then for the objective, that's just assigning a goal for what we're setting out to do. And that's very important for us, whether it's a training mission or a combat mission. We always have an objective or a mission goal. And this is what I tell business owners: that needs to be very measurable and attainable. And by that, I mean, a very simplistic explanation is, we don't just want to make as many widgets as we can today, because it's not measurable. And at the end of the day, we don't know if we've achieved it or not. And it also needs to be attainable, like a realistic goal. So by making our goal for today, our objective, measurable and attainable, we can then look back in the debrief and see whether we achieved it, why or why not. If we did, maybe we can up that goal for tomorrow. And if we didn't, what were our shortcomings or pitfalls? So overview, then objective, where we assign the goal. And then I talk really quickly about tactics. And that's very simply where we assign individual roles, expectations, and accountabilities. So this makes clear to everybody what's expected of them. What is their roles, expectations, and accountabilities? That's the tactics portion. And then a quick review. And that is very simply wrapping up everything that we've talked about that we're setting out to do. And then a quick ask: is anybody concerned about anything? Any underlying threats that we can expect to face in what we're doing today? Any pitfalls that we can expect? So overview, objective, tactics, and review. And that's what we talk about for the brief.
No, that's good. I like that. I like that a lot. So you've given the brief, and a concern is brought up that perhaps, obviously it's nice to be working in a team, that consistent team where you know what everybody's like, but maybe a wrench is thrown in by something happens to an existing team member, somebody new is brought in. So do you do anything different in that circumstance where you've got a new team member and you don't really know their background or history?
Certainly, that's a great question. That's where these 7 critical skills of crew resource management that I emphasized during the execution phase of this process, that's where they come in so heavily. And especially when I talk about communication and assertiveness, and we're convincing new people that even though they might be a little bit intimidated by their surroundings and not very comfortable with what's going on with this new organization, they still have not only the responsibility, but the authority to speak up and take part, using that assertiveness tool to take part in what we're doing. And then certainly keeping the lines of communication open. One of the things I stress, Robert, about the leadership thing is not your and my instantly knee-jerk definition of leadership, and that is a designated leader. That's the person where he or she is at the top of the pyramid. They're at the top of the hierarchy because of role or title of their position. I really stress the importance of functional leaders. And that is when people take command of a situation, when certain expertise or need for information arises that only one person has, even though they may not be at the top of that leadership hierarchy. And that person, whether it be a new or inexperienced person, might be the person that can really save the day with a critical piece of information. That's why the communication and assertiveness skills, it all kind of wraps together in this crew resource management game.
Cool. No, I like that. Um, so, jumping into the execution part, inevitably, there's some challenges that come up. It could be something as, well, maybe as simple as weather, but usually something comes along that, throws a wrench in it. How do you either practice or give instructions, or how do you sort of recommend when you deal with those types of scenarios?
That's a great question. One of the things that we stress in the review from our brief as we're getting ready to start the execution phase is something that we call the wingman mentality. And that is very simply that you watch my back and I watch yours. We are all going to rely on each other, regardless of rank, experience level, gender, race, background, regardless of all that. In the fighter pilot community, all wingmen are equals. And it's so powerful to say, you watch my back, I watch yours, and we're all ultimately responsible to achieve that objective that we set out to do in the brief. And I love this idea of being each other's wingman because it's so powerful to give each other the authority and responsibility to call each other out on little mistakes. And nobody gets offended. Nobody gets their feelings hurt because we all have thick enough skin to say, is this what's best for our team? So that's really powerful with the wingman mentality. That's kind of how we embark on the execution phase, is to say, we're all in this together, from the CEO on down to the newest person on the team, and everybody's kind of equals in achieving that mission objective or our goal for the day.
Right. No, I like that. I like the wingman approach. Now, obviously a lot of that is based on trust. You have to have really deep trust in, effectively seeing somebody to watch my back. And, inevitably, many companies, that trust isn't necessarily there. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have their own agendas. They're always looking out for themselves. So what are some of the ways that you've seen to really build and enhance that trust?
That's an awesome question. And it's so poignant for what we're dealing with now with this current pandemic, is that more and more companies that I've been talking to virtually and consulting with and coaching are doing a lot of their telecommuting. So they're doing weekly calls on Zoom or what have you. So what we do is the final step of this debrief and perfect phase of this process is where we go into a debrief to say, how do we do during this 8-hour shift or 5-day work week or whatever this project was? And in the debrief, we sit down and ask everyone to share, give me one thing that you did well this week. Share with me one big success that you had and talk me through it. And that way, Robert, if you share with me something that you did that you may think might have been obvious to everyone, it wasn't that obvious to me, and you just raised my level of performance. If I'm ever faced with that same situation again, my skill set just got that much better. So after going around the room and everybody shares a success that they've had, and it's kind of nice to pat yourself on the back and say, look how great I am. This was an awesome win. I helped the team. Then we go around the room again and a little more uncomfortable, and we say, share with me something that you messed up this week. Share with me a mistake that you made or something that you dorked up. And this is very powerful coming from a group of fighter pilots, I believe, that people think we have the biggest egos in the world. But during this debrief phase, we really set those egos aside to really scrutinize ourselves on how we can perform better tomorrow. So we go around the room and ask, what did you mess up? And it's my opportunity to say, even if I knew, nobody on the team knew I made this mistake, and I don't want to share this with anybody. If I just swept it under the rug, nobody would know and I wouldn't look bad. But those are the little simple and repeatable mistakes that are cancerous within an organization. And if you're ever faced with that situation again, you might repeat the same mistake that I made today. But if I bring it up and share with you the mistake I made, what I should have done, then we can talk through the brief, execute, debrief, and those 7 critical skills of crew resource management. Everybody sees that I'm sharing with the team how we can get better. And now nobody on the team is ever going to repeat that mistake again because they know what we're supposed to do. And I just elevated the team's performance.
Right.
And that level of openness and honesty really helps build trust and confidence in the whole team, from the CEO down to the newest person, saying, wow, we know we're all going to make mistakes. Let's own up to them and not hide it, because it makes the team better if we do it. And it really grows the trust and confidence. And it truly makes everybody who's involved with this whole process feel like they have a much bigger ownership stake in what's going on every time they show up to work.
No, and I've got an interesting question around that. So when I heard Alan Mullally, he was the incoming CEO to Ford back in the day. I think he was brought in and he quickly realized that they were literally weeks away from bankruptcy.
Wow.
And he would have, the management team and, everybody would step up and effectively, I don't know if it was debriefing, but it was just the more reporting on how well their divisions were doing. And everybody was like, oh, everything's good. And he obviously quickly realized there's a big disconnect because, here's the company going to bankruptcy and all these senior executives were all saying everything was good. So obviously that trust had been eroded. So, he obviously changed that environment and allowed people to build up that trust that they weren't going to be chastised to actually stepping up and being vulnerable. So my question is then, when you've got not many companies do that debriefing part, become vulnerable, actually, step up and say, hey, I screwed up here. How do you make that transition? How do you start that whole process? And I assume it's going to happen over time. It's not going to happen overnight.
It certainly does not happen overnight. You're right. And this skill set, the whole process is kind of an art form, and it's taught and it's learned. And the tone has to be set from the CEO on down. And he or she has to be the first one to stand up at the first time that we even try and conduct a debrief like this and say, first of all, here's the mistakes I made this week. And it's no harm, no foul. And I've worked with Fortune 500 companies that have instituted this debrief thing, that are major manufacturing firms, or on down to small law firms. And everybody's kind of amazed with the trust and confidence that grows after seeing senior people, these guys and gals, open up about what their shortcomings were. And the first time you see your boss do it, you say, wow, they're really honest about that. And then the people keep doing deeper and deeper dives into their mistakes. And it really helps the team elevate their performance. But the tone is really set with the leadership, certainly.
No, that's good. And how frequently would you say those meetings should occur?
What I see the most successful application for all the corporate and certainly the international workplace that I've done with hundreds of companies is kind of a Monday morning brief and a Friday afternoon debrief. Okay. And it can be done in person or on Zoom calls. But it kind of gives everybody an opportunity to go through the execution phase and see what their successes and failures were during the week, and then wrap it up. And then Friday, we roll those lessons learned straight into our brief on Monday so we can keep growing.
Cool. No, I like it. That's a good recommendation. So I need to ask you this. Talk to me about, think back without giving me any sort of military secrets, but anything that would be a good story to share on something that, you did everything perfectly. You did the, initial brief, you did the execution, you did the debrief, and you could think back and wow, that was really top class the way I did that.
I think one of my favorite stories for the success of this entire process that I just shared with you is a time that I was flying on a training mission with my wingman, and we were going down to a bombing range in North Carolina. Perfect weather day, everything's gorgeous, and everything went as planned until my jet had a pretty major malfunction. And the whole process, I'll share with you the story. Do we have enough time?
Yeah.
So we were flying at 14,500 feet en route to North Carolina from Virginia. And we're flying at Mach 0.97, or just under the speed of sound.
Wow. And
just before I call for our next maneuver, I say to my wingman, who's tucked in just 36 inches away from me, we're in a tight formation in two F-18 Hornet fighter jets. Just before I call for our next maneuver, I start seeing stars. much like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. And I said to my wingman, who, by the way, is the best wingman in the Navy at the time, unbelievable supporting cast that I had with me on this flight this day. I said, Mordo, I think I'm hypoxic. I didn't know it yet, but my onboard oxygen generating system had failed.
Oh.
And my brain was suffering from a lack of oxygen to the brain. I said, Mordo, I think I'm hypoxic. And he said, pull the green ring. That's a very simple procedure that we have for hypoxia. And it's a little green handle outboard of my left thigh on the ejection seat that activates our emergency oxygen system. But right as he said that, my symptoms got worse. And I lost all my peripheral vision, and we call it tunnel vision. So you can only see directly what you're staring at, because as we start to suffer from the symptoms of hypoxia, one of the most sensitive things that we have is the blood in our eyes. So as that's all leaving me, I can see only what I'm staring at. And then about one more breath later, I lose my vision entirely, and we call it gray out. I'm 100% conscious with all my motor skills. I simply can't see. And as I started to think about what Mordo yelled to me about pull the green ring, total euphoria came over my body. It's essentially like you're stoned.
Right.
And I remember marveling at the brilliance of Mordo's idea, saying, dude, that's a great idea. I mean, that's what you do when you're hypoxic, you pull the green ring. All the while my symptoms are getting worse as my brain is starving of oxygen. Then again, in the back of my mind, I hear Mort screaming, pull the green ring, pull the green ring. And somehow my left index finger activated the emergency oxygen system. And with a few deep breaths, a couple seconds later, I'm totally back to normal, good to go. So we obviously return to base and have an uneventful landing. But the procedural excellence that Mordo had to follow, guiding me through, is so important because militarily, I outrank him. When we're on the ground, my position in the Navy is very senior to his rank. In this flight, I am the flight leader. Senior to his position is what we call -2, or my wingman. Everything in our world says that I tell him what to do and not vice versa.
Right.
But this process that I shared with you kind of gives everybody, like I said, the authority and responsibility I give to him so he can tell me what to do in order to keep me alive, in order to keep our formation intact, and ultimately to achieve that mission objective or the goal that we set for ourselves today. So I love the fact that I told you earlier, wingmen, regardless of experience level or gender or race, orientation, anything like that, all wingmen are equal. And I think that is the success that you base this whole process on, is that all wingmen are equal, and the successful outcome of our mission depends on that.
Yeah, wow, that's a powerful story. Really appreciate you sharing that. Wow, that could have been totally a different scenario.
Absolutely.
Wow, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So we're just finishing up here. A couple last things. If you have a parting message or two for all of our listeners, or business owners or executives, what would be the parting message for them?
I think that the parting message that I would have, Robert, is simply to flatten the hierarchy a little bit. If you want to see huge gains in your organization or your team's human performance and reducing mistakes, is simply to flatten the hierarchy. And by that, I mean to make the CEO not as high above that newest employee. And you're not giving up any of your authority. What you're doing is empowering your employees to have a little bit more trust and confidence in the whole process, like I said, and showing our vulnerability with sharing our mistakes and making it okay. I mean, human beings make mistakes. That's what we do. Cicero said it 2,000 years ago. To err is human. We need to share those with each other so we're not repeating them. And that's what fighter pilots do to be successful. And that's what business owners can do too.
No, I like that. If people want to learn more about you, find out what you do, your speaking arrangements, what's the best way for them to contact you, Jack?
Thanks, Robert. That's the easiest way to get us is on the website Supersonic Success, all one word put together, supersonicsuccess.com. And it's got certainly email and phone access. And I love chatting about this, obviously, because I'm very passionate, certainly about flying supersonic fighter jets and just helping people perform at peak levels of human performance. So supersonicsuccess.com, and certainly following us on Instagram at Get Jack Becker, just as my keynote speaking thing. Get Jack Becker on Instagram, and LinkedIn. It's Jack Becker, founder and CEO of Flight Level Solutions. So
awesome.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you, Jack. Really appreciate your time today. Great messages. Really appreciate you sharing the stories, and good luck with everything, and good luck getting back from Pennsylvania.
Well, thanks so much, Robert. Thank you for having me. Always great chatting with you.
Okay, you too. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today, and you got some great takeaways for your business or your personal life. This is Robert Clinkybeard along with David Anderson, and we'd love to get you and your friends to join us in our future journey. Two quick things before you go, listeners. Check out our website, commerciallandscapers.com. You can subscribe, you can share with your friends, but more importantly, check out our new sponsor, Site Recon. We're going to make your sales process, your estimating way easier, so you can spend more time in your proposals. Thanks everyone. Cheers.